Welcome to the Take a Mulligan podcast with your hosts, Brian and Kenny Mulligan. We hope to encourage you not to quit and keep going. If you're at that place where you just want to stop and give up, don't. Second chances can happen. Try again and take a mulligan.
Much for listening or watching with us today. We're so glad that you can join us for today's episode. Today, we're going to dive into a little bit about what our earliest memories are about sports or fitness or exercise or kind of all those aspects of our life that we knew when we were kind of kids and growing up and where that's taken us throughout our lives. So we're going to dive right in today. So I'm just going to jump in here and ask Kenny and say, Ken, what's the earliest memory that you have of any kind of concept of fitness, whether it was sports or working out or just playing or whatever it was?
I wouldn't have termed it as like thinking in terms of fitness, but I would say growing up as a kid, we used to play around all the time. I mean, you would just go outside, you would play. I mean, when we were little, we played with trucks in the sandbox, you know. But then as soon as you could start running around, I mean, we played kickball and we played tag and freeze tag, and you had the chain off the front porch because front porch used to be base and all the kids used to come out, play around. Yeah. That's just what life was. Remember? I mean, you remember going out and playing all the time, don't you?
Yeah, I mean that's what I remember as young as I can remember, being outside. We were always outside. And I think this generation is so different that way. Even raising my own kids and raising your own kids, it's a very different generation now. We were just used to being outside. It was okay to be outside. Nobody was nervous to be outside. We weren't as scared to be outside of what would happen if we were outside. We would always play sports, football, basketball, wiffle ball, baseball. We'd go for walks. We'd ride our bikes everywhere. It was just
remember riding our bikes, and I remember thinking, riding your bike like, go ahead.
Yeah, it was just we would ride our bikes everywhere we went. We'd ride to our friends' houses. It was nothing to walk a mile up to 7-Eleven to go play arcades or go get some Slurpees and stuff. That was always a common thing we did. Or we'd ride up there with our bikes. We'd ride somewhere to go, fishing up by, the college and hang around up there. We rode around there all the time when we were kids. So we always were out on our bikes, or we were always walking. The earliest memory I have of a job was delivering papers, right? And I was either out on my skateboard delivering or collecting, or out on my bike delivering or collecting.
Oh, man. I remember your skateboard. You were in a skateboard phase for a while.
Yeah, for a little while. But it just was a very different time, I think. I was never very good at it, but it was that time.
It was. It was a different time. But for me, it was, even the bicycle was like the independence. So I remember like even probably at 12, 13, 14, like you couldn't drive a car yet, but I could go for a bike ride and go out 30 miles for a bike ride kind of thing, And you were just like amazed, like, oh, wow, I drove this many miles tonight, because a little odometer thing on your bicycle and all that kind of stuff. But so I just remember being active as a kid. And I guess you didn't even think of it in terms of fitness, though, So
No.
I guess the first time really introduced to fitness was when you were in gym class, right? I mean, freshman year, I remember the dread of, okay, now we have physical education class, right? They called it PE at the time, and we just called it gym class. But that was your first introduction to, okay, you're supposed to be physically fit in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. And I mean, I think, for you, was there sports involved a little bit that kind of started a little bit of that? I know for me it was, but is that kind of where some of the outside activity outside of like just playing outside was?
Yeah. I mean, I played baseball as a kid, little league. And that was probably, I don't know, was that third, fourth grade? I don't even know what little league is. I think once you got to sixth grade, that was the big stuff. And then they played a little bit more serious, but yeah, I was just third, fourth, fifth grade, I guess. And then played basketball a little bit. But that was really young. I mean, by the time I got to high school, I didn't play any sports because I don't know, I got turned off from sports. I really did. I just got turned off from the whole, I guess, some of the politics that were involved and just seeing it as a kid and that kind of stuff. But when you played sports, you probably played a lot more than I did.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up playing most things. I dabbled with soccer a little bit, played baseball a little bit, was never very good at baseball, but stuck with basketball and played that the most. But I mean, that was probably the biggest, avenue that I had of getting into more of a fitness type of thing. Cause we never worked out as kids or, even in junior high, whereas nowadays I think kids are, as much as they're inactive with like being outside and running around, I think they almost have that different mentality because of social media of like, oh, I got to start working out and changing my body size as I get into, junior high, and I want to be a better baseball player, better basketball player, whatever. So I think, getting that aspect of like, hey, I need to start exercising to build muscle is more the opportunity now than we ever had. I mean, growing up, there was no gyms around. I mean, there was like Valleys, maybe.
Yeah.
Some of the Ys that we never went to or ever had access to. So, going to a gym was just not even a thing.
Yeah, that's true.
And, for me, again, just being
Yeah.
active with sports and running and staying in shape, feeling like you were in shape during the season and stuff was probably the biggest thing I ever did. I was never like, oh, let me go for a run at 12 years old. That just wasn't something I would do. But because we were so active, I think with, like you said, playing tag and playing hide and go seek and running around and riding our bikes all over the place, I think the endurance that we had for sports was kind of almost natural versus kids today who don't do that, So if they're not riding their bikes everywhere and walking everywhere like we used to do, right, they're not going to have that kind of endurance. So they almost have to build that up and have their like preseason training to get ready for a season. Whereas we didn't really have that because it wasn't a thing, but I almost feel like we didn't need it because we were always active.
Yeah.
So what was the next
true.
experience
I think that's why you have.
Yeah, go ahead.
I know to say I think that's why kids today. I think you have such a difference between those who play sports and those who are just very sedimentary. Is that the right word? They're just they don't do anything. Yeah, sedentary.
Yeah.
So I just think they sit around. But yes, I think in high school, looking back, I was not in favor of taking gym class. And I had the whole concept you had to take a shower, and all that kind of stuff. And you have all of like, what do we have, 50-minute classes. So by the time you get in there, get dressed, come on out, they line you up, you stretch a little bit. What do you get, like 10 minutes of class,
Yeah. And then depending on the class.
I was doing some research.
Yeah, go ahead.
I say, I was actually doing some research, that they're saying that the average gym class today, kids in physical education class in schools are only getting like 16 minutes of actual physical activity.
Wow.
And it's like, wow. So we're not getting a whole lot, even with this gym class, mandatory stuff and all that. But I wasn't too, I felt the difference, I think, between the kids who played sports and the kids who didn't play sports when we went to gym class. So that was a hard thing for me. And it's not that I wasn't athletic, it wasn't that I couldn't play the sports. I just wasn't as good as the other kids, because I didn't play the basketball, the whatever sport, you were playing in gym class at the time. But I felt like I was one of those kids who was uncoordinated and all that kind of stuff. And yet I wasn't, because, we started playing, and I was probably during the high school years, started playing volleyball in our backyard. And you probably remember some of those things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that really came from our older brother, Barry, and his friends,
Yeah. Yeah. I remember he found like an old volleyball set when he was like, I don't know, he was like a janitor at a high school or something. And he found like an old net and poles, and we put it up in mom's backyard. And every Sunday night you guys had your friends over, and we'd tag along, me and Sean, and then eventually, we got old enough and good enough that we started playing for real with you guys.
And we played hard. We didn't play, it wasn't like a casual Sunday night volleyball. We played hard, man. We were setting up, we were spiking, we were, yeah, it was intense. We had a good time. And it was mixed because there were, girls involved in that too and stuff, but they were all into it too. It was like, yeah, let's play some real volleyball, Yeah. But I remember get back in high school somewhere, and I don't know. To this day, I don't know like what inspired me or what it was, but I bought a set of weights, and
I remember those
started
weights.
lifting
the old gray cement weights.
It was, and his weight bench that like the foam on there was not worth anything. It's still like you're laying on a board. But that was my first journey into any kind of I guess weightlifting kind of thing,
And what made you get into that? Like, what spurred that on for you to buy a weight set?
I don't remember. I remember, I used to work at this place called Halo Farms, which if you live in Trenton, New Jersey, you know where that is, and because they have the best ice cream around. But working there was a guy that was in the production end who used to package the milk cartons and stuff like that. And I remember talking about getting in shape with him. And that's sort of vague, but I wonder if the two are to get connected or not. I just don't remember. But
Okay.
I lifted for a little while and it sort of just faded out,
And just
kind of
fade it
thing.
out. I think that's that typical time.
And
I
then
mean, I know for me
you
too. I
picked it up.
remember. Yeah, because I remember I remember when you got that set in the basement, and of course you're 18, so I was probably like 8 or 9, I guess, right? You're probably 17. I'm like 7, 8 or 9, somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
And I'm watching you do this, and I was kind of curious about it, but of course I was kind of young to even consider it. And then of course when I got in high school and the set was still around, I'm like, well, now I'm in high school. Now I want to start working out because us guys are all supposed to get buff in high school, so all the girls recognize us and stuff. That was the main draw. So I started working out then too, the same thing. And I think a lot of my buddies were doing the same thing. They had a weight set in their house or they were doing something. We did get exposure in gym class a little bit. And then from playing basketball in high school, we got access to the weight room at the high school, which was kind of this dingy basement thing. It wasn't like that high tech or really great. And we would go down there from time to time, and we were expected to go down there. So that was
Yeah.
like the first experience I had, but it was almost like, again, you walked in and it was always that intimidation factor, just like gym class. It was like, okay, well, I don't know what
Yeah.
I'm doing here. And I'm supposed to know because I'm a guy and we're supposed to be working out and getting buff and getting big and, getting stronger and more muscular and all this stuff. But I have no idea what I'm doing. There's all these weights. What am I supposed to do? And I remember like one of the gym teachers, I think, was trying to kind of give us a little guidance on there, but I never really felt like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do. And this is what we're supposed to do to work together. And,
Yeah.
some
I
guys in
thought,
there, of course, in high school, there's always guys who are like, oh, I know exactly what I'm doing. And they probably had no idea, but you're following their lead because like, okay, I guess he knows what he's doing. So we really had very little knowledge of
yeah.
it. And again, I don't really remember learning too much in gym class in high school about how to work out with sets and reps and all these different things. College, I had more classes and we did more about that and learned a lot more about that. But that was probably my only exposure to it. Other than that, like I said, it faded. I definitely worked out a little bit more in high school, a little bit into college, dabbled a little bit with, the fitness rooms in the colleges I was at. But I never really joined a gym. That was never a thing for me in my early adulthood. And I would try to stay in shape just by doing different things at home, doing exercise at home, go for runs from time to time, but nothing real super consistent in my young adult life. So where did that shift and change for you if you kind of dropped it off in high school and didn't really have any other access to fitness or exercise?
Yeah. I mean, it was definitely actually it was probably a little past high school because I remember I remember one incident where I had been working out for a little while and I remember going to a pool party and this was probably like 18, 19 years old. So it was like, freshman, sophomore kind of year, college kind of years, those years. And I remember one of my friends, man, was like, man, were you working out today? Because you look like you're, starting to, look a little like you're working out. I'm like, well, that's cool. But probably shortly after that, I don't know, it just faded out. I don't know. I just don't have time for it. You start to,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't become a priority. And I think when you're young,
Yeah.
you think, I'm in shape. I'm good. I can do
Yep.
things, and we don't think about till we get hit later in life. Now, for
Yeah.
me, I really, because of struggling through, multiple sclerosis and stuff like that, I really didn't even think about trying to get. Well, I thought about trying to get in shape because the doctor kept telling you got to exercise, you got to exercise. But when you're feeling like garbage, you don't want to, you don't want to exercise. And so it wasn't that we didn't do things because one of the things we even did with with our kids young was we went hiking all the time. We tried to hike as much as we could when I wasn't feeling good. Obviously, don't go hiking and stuff like that. But usually, to get on some kind of fitness routine or something like you're working out 2, 3 days, 4 days a week or something like that, that was just foreign to me. And I remember
Mm-hmm.
looking at this whole world of fitness when I was thinking of getting connected with a health and nutrition company was I'm not one of those people. I don't go to the gym. I have no clue what kind of equipment to use or not to use. I don't know what a rep is. So somebody have to explain that to me, and I don't carry those water bottles and I definitely don't wear those yoga pants. So it's like,
Hopefully not.
um, but so I was very hesitant about it. No, yeah. But so I was very hesitant about it. I honestly was, and until I started feeling better, and when I started feeling better, then it sort of just spurted on. I say, wow, now I can start working out, and then it was like, okay, well, what do you start with? So that's really where it started turning around. That's about 7 years ago, already here. Wow. And but how are you? When would you now? You're very different than I am because you're always active in sports, play basketball and stuff like that. But when do you think like all of a sudden you started looking at it from a, oh yeah, I need to stay in shape regularly. I got to keep working out. I got to do something.
Yeah, well, I think like you mentioned, I think that was a good point you mentioned is, when we are young in our, teens, 20s, we do think, I mean, one, we think we're invincible. So of course we think, oh, I'm in shape. Even if you're not really that in shape, you still
Yep.
think you're in shape because again, you're young, you have a high metabolism, maybe you're not that overweight, you probably have low body fat, all these factors that you typically would see. And for me, it was, it's funny you mentioned the pool party and stuff because, I remember in junior high, like seventh, eighth grade, that's when things got really crazy because now you're like, oh my gosh, now you're all worried about that. You're worried about body image and you're worried about, oh my gosh, if we go on a field trip for school and we got to go to a water park and am I going to take my shirt off or what am I going to look like compared to other people? And I just remember so specifically when I was probably like 12, I think maybe I was, in that puberty phase of like, your body changing and stuff. I was always pretty thin. I guess I have a high metabolism. I've always, not had any issues with weight and became very conscious of that as I've gotten older to try to maintain that as much as possible. But I remember when I was 12, I was very into basketball. And I remember we had a pool at home and then the liner ripped and it was just kind of a mess for years. Well, finally I was like, you know what? I'd love to have a basketball court back here. So I remember, the pool got taken down and then I remember, a couple of you guys I think helped. I know our brother-in-law Hank helped me out a lot with that. We basically built a patio out of blocks that were there from the pool and got more and we made like a little mini basketball court. So that was like my thing. And I remember for whatever reason there was like pictures being taken at the time or something during this whole construction thing. And I remember looking back at a picture of me when I was like 12 and I had my shirt off because it's hot in the summer and I thought I'm cool. And I just remember looking at this thing like, oh my goodness, who is this guy? He looks kind of chunky. And it just hit me like I never really thought of myself as chunky ever because I was always pretty thin. And I guess I was, again, going through one of these, growth phases or something through puberty. So it hit me. And
Yeah.
after that, I was like, I don't want to look like that. So I think in my head, I got in this perception of like, I don't really want to feel or look overweight to me personally. Now, I know a lot of people struggle with that and I'm not knocking that at all. For me personally, it became a very big self-motivating thing. So for me, even though I was not exercising regularly all the time, I would kind of just be very conscious of that. I remember, finishing up a basketball season, probably junior year. I felt like I was in the best shape of my life. And we went to the doctor for like a well checkup or something like that. And I remember the doctor telling me, telling mom, he's got to exercise more. I thought, what in the world are you talking about? I just got out of a basketball season. What else could I be doing? So then kind of transitioning forward a little bit, like you said, I just felt like I was always pretty healthy. We never admit that we're not, or that we're not in shape. And being a physical therapist, obviously I want to kind of portray that in not just, saying, hey, I'm healthy and not. I want to be that picture of health for people to again, maintain my weight, maintain some healthy lifestyles and healthy living. I enjoy all the bad stuff with food and stuff at times too, but try to be a little bit more conscious of it. And for me, it became a real conscious effort to say, you know what, I'm not going to I don't want to get overweight. I don't want to change my pant size. I don't want to be uncomfortable in the pant size. I'm not going to change them. And it's been a long time since I've changed pant size. I don't even know how long. And I'm not planning to change them. So that's my motivation to stay that way. But for me, again, like I never really did a whole lot of workout routines. I did, some stuff at home at times. And now in the last, again, probably about 7 years, like you mentioned, when we got into this health and fitness industry, that's where I became a lot more conscious of it, learned a lot more. And again, I've always known a lot about fitness because that's what I do for a living. I'm helping people exercise all the time and, sharing different things with them, but learned a whole lot more with this. And it's really changed my mindset as far as looking at health at a much bigger component, not just like hitting the gym or losing the weight, but, all different factors of health and fitness. So I think for me, it was probably in the last 7 or 8 years. And I've tried to get a lot more consistent and conscious with doing different workouts at home or at my office at times. and trying to be more consistent in that way and definitely more mindful of it. So it definitely was a more recent thing for me too, to get more consistent. So for you, when it comes to fitness now,
Okay.
like where is your journey at this point and what's that look like?
Yeah. So for me, here I was looking at the health and wellness company and wanting to get involved, and yet very hesitant. And here I am, because I'm 5'5". You're a little taller than I am, but I'm pushing almost 200 pounds at the time, and I was definitely not in shape. And same thing, if you're gonna talk about health and wellness, is like you gotta look at least a little the part. At least you got to be working towards something, right? And so it was during that time when, again, I started feeling better because of the health and nutrition, that starting to be able to work out and starting to exercise even a little bit, and then obviously changing some things in my life. Once I started feeling better, the weight started dropping because of some of the things I do nutritionally. And then once you start exercising with eating right, and of course I found, I mean, one of the weird things is exercise doesn't do a whole lot for my body genetically to lose weight. And that's something I didn't know back then. I know that now, but I needed to work out, do some more things in the kitchen. So one of the things, cutting out coffee with all the creamer, because mine was like half and half kind of thing, and then just starting to exercise. And I still look back and at some of, like, I was using 3-pound weights to just start, and I was doing maybe a few of the planks, and it was really small stuff, but you're working towards something, and that's what I think
Mm-hmm.
is so. I guess if I could encourage somebody to start exercising, it's like it's not the big stuff. We look at some people who can do so much and think, oh, I can never get there, I can never get there.
Mm.
But if you just start taking a little step in the right direction, it's amazing where you will end up. You know, and it may take a year or 2 years or 5 years, but you start to make some changes, and so now a lot of things have changed. Because of this.
So what is your what's your outcome after this? Because you have actually a pretty cool story of like how much that's changed, physically, and I'm gonna give you a lot of props because you've worked really hard at all this, and you've gotten some really great results. So if you don't mind sharing, what is the I guess the weight loss that you had in the last couple of years, and just kind of where you're at now with your workout.
So it's been about 40 pounds roughly, because I'm at that weight right now where I fluctuate a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm still trying to understand the difference between the gym and the kitchen, in
Mm-hmm.
sense of trying to figure out the optimal for my body type, again, based on genetics and stuff like that. But yeah, so now actually, we were just talking about this before we started. I'm working out 3 days a week because I'm really trying to watch my rest period. So I want to work
Mm-hmm.
out hard, and then as much as I want to go to the gym the next day to work out again, it's like, no, give your body that day to rest and
Mm-hmm.
recuperate, because I have delayed onset muscle soreness that mine's usually 24 hours. So I really feel it 24 hours later. So it actually helps to take that whole day of rest. Not that you don't do anything. Like if Julie, my wife, wanted to go out and take a walk, we'd be like, sure, let's go take a walk, that kind of things. But I won't go do the resistant weights and stuff like that. And and now I, for the first time in my life, I ever joined a gym, and that's crazy to even think about. But I'm very much, I got to go 3 days a week and try my hardest to get there 3 days a week, work out for about an hour or more if I can, and then come back home. So tomorrow I got an early appointment, so I think I got to hit the gym by 6 o'clock in order to get done and then come back to start my day. So you just squeeze it in.
Yeah, that's great. And again, I'm really proud of you. I mean, you've really made a great strides in your health in the last several years, and
Well,
it
thanks.
showed, and it's just awesome to see, how much that's changed your life. I wanted to come back around to the
Yep.
topic a little bit about the gym and the intimidation, the gymtation or gym intimidation, whatever you want to call it.
That's a
I
good
think
word.
it's an
Intimidation.
interesting thing because again, like I mentioned, when I was in high school, it was like you were kind of intimidated because you didn't know what to do, and I think a lot of people, the gym scares them because they don't know what to do. I mean, I work with patients all the time, and they'll tell me like, well, I kind of want to do the gym, but I don't know what to do on the machines. Like if you put me in a gym, I don't really know what to
Mhm.
do on there, or try to figure out what I'm doing. And I don't want to pay for a personal trainer because that's expensive and they're just going to show me one time and then I pay them and then I'm done. And then I have to figure it out on my own. So I think that piece of it. And then you take the piece in of like, well, I don't look like them and I don't feel like them. And they've been on the treadmill for an hour and I can only do 5 minutes. So now I don't even want to go to the gym. It's not worth it. And I think, we have to recognize that like everybody's needs are so different, everybody's goals are so different. And when I work with patients, it's the same thing. It's, I'm trying to tell them like, listen, your goal doesn't have to be your neighbor's goal. Your goal doesn't have to be your daughter's goal or your brother's goal or anybody else's goal. Your goal is your goal. It's your individual goal. And for a lot of people, losing the weight or increasing strength or whatever they're trying to get to, I think the biggest thing is trying to get them to understand that just by moving and just by doing things, just by being active is a helpful thing. And I also have to tell them a lot of times, you can't substitute life activity with exercise. You do have to separate them. So yes, it's great to have, those step counters and the watches and everything counting your steps and saying, hey, I went, 10,000 steps today. Okay. Well, how many can you walk in one time? I just do it all day and all day it tracks it, which is great. Again, I think they're a great tool, but I think they can also be a misconception of people to understand that like, well, I can walk 10,000 steps a day. Okay. But can you walk 5,000 in one shot? No, I can't do that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then that's a different story, So I think understanding that like, there's exercise and there's activity. I get people all the time who say, oh, I did my exercise. I cleaned the house. Well, that's great that you were active and I don't want to take that away from you, but that is not exercise. You can exercise and then you can go clean the house. They're two separate things. And the fact that you have the physical ability to clean the house, because some people don't, is a great thing. But then, to try to take that to the next level and say, okay, if I can physically clean the house, then I should be able to physically go for a walk. And now I'm doing exercise. And I think, taking that piece away and then helping them understand as well that, everybody gets discouraged along this journey of health and fitness, whether again, it's, I'm not losing the weight, the scale's not changing, the pants still are tight, I can't walk a mile yet. I'm still walking a half a mile and I'm still all winded at the end of it. But, you can't walk a mile without walking a step, right? Or 10 steps. You can't run a marathon if you don't run a mile. Yeah. So you have to take everything a little step at a time and you have to be encouraged by each of those little things. And for some people, the fact of just being encouraged by a little thing, now I can go up the steps without being winded or having pain in my knee, or I can get up off the floor now with my grandkids and I couldn't do that before. So all of these little goals, I think, are so important, and people look at the scale so much when I think that's such a misnomer to what your overall health and your function looks like. And I think that's what's so important that people miss on.
Yeah, we're going to have to come back to the whole topic of weight loss and stuff like that too.
Yeah, definitely. But I think just encouraging people, this show's about, taking a mulligan, taking a second chance. And I think, just to encourage everyone out there that's listening or watching, everybody can make an impact on your health journey. It's just one step at a time. You got to take it one little step at a time, and it's not going to happen overnight. It's definitely not going to happen overnight. It takes commitment. It takes, motivation. It takes self-determination. And that's where the results come in is when you say, hey, I'm going to do this for this reason, and I'm going to stick with it. And when you stick with it and when you start to see the results, that's where things really change for you. And, we want to encourage people on this podcast here to, again, remember that, maybe you had 15 failed health journeys. Maybe you've tried to lose weight 30 times in your lifetime and it's never really worked. And maybe you've tried to go to the gym and you get discouraged and something happens and it turns you off and then you don't go again. Maybe you need a different type of setup. Everybody's different with that too. Not everybody wants to go into the gym and just pound on exercise machines. Some people need a class. They need a group class. They need that motivation from the other people around them. For me, just put me in a gym and let me do my thing. That's how I would rather work out. I'm not into the group classes so much for me. That's just my personal preference. So, finding that personal preference, I think, is important. And then understanding, like, what is this journey going to look like? And then what is it going to take to get there? So don't be discouraged if you've tried things that haven't worked before. Be encouraged that you can always pick it back up and try something again. and, give yourself that mulligan. Don't be afraid to try again. If something has failed in your health and fitness journey, if it started with gym class and you were intimidated by the rest of the athletes in the class, and now that's taken you all the way through into your 30s and you're too intimidated to go into the gym and be around other people, don't let that intimidate you. Nothing can stop you. You're capable of a lot of things you don't realize you are. So go ahead and take that mulligan and take that chance.
Hey, we know everyone can use a second chance or a do-over, so take a mulligan. Try again. Thanks so much for joining with us today. Make sure you follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Like, click, and subscribe.